Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with the story of how Beethoven's Fifth turned me into a critic. And it happened with about 10 seconds worth of music. It's really amazing. You know, the job of criticism consists basically of two separate activities. Activity number one is talking about music that you or the critic has never heard before, and likely the audience has never heard before, and making some sort of assessment of whether or not it's any good or not. It could be new, it could be something revived that's old, but it's unusual and rare. And so the critic is supposed to offer some sort of guidance as to whether or not it's worth someone's time. That's the first job. But the second job, and for me, the much more interesting job, actually, the job that involves recordings, if you're a record critic, which I really am, is making comparisons and explaining comparisons and talking about the differences between interpretations, which I find absolutely fascinating. And this is how it happened. See, my first recording of Beethoven's Fifth, the one that I owned and cherished, was Otto Klemperer with the Philharmonia. This baby. This is a whole box, but it's in this baby. And I just grew up thinking that was what Beethoven's Fifth sounded like, basically. Now, of course, I'd heard other versions of it, but I hadn't paid attention to other versions. You know how that goes, right? I mean, the music is just sort of in your blood. It's in the environment. You may hear it. Someone else may have a recording. My mother had a recording of it. I don't remember which one, but she had it. But this was mine. I owned it. And because I owned it, I wanted to know it. So I played it all the time, and I really had it in my head. That was what Beethoven's Fifth sounded like. Now, some of you may say, oh boy, that's why, Hurwitz doesn't like period instruments because Klemperer's big and heavy and slow and all that. Yeah, that's all a topic for another day. I since have come to enjoy many other versions, as you will know from my repertoire chats. But anyway, Klemperer had certain predilections, which I didn't identify as specific to Klemperer at the time, but he did. He liked very forward woodwind balances. That's number one. And he liked really sculpted bass lines. And it turned out that those predilections are absolutely fabulous in music of the classical period. But in any case, so here's Beethoven's Fifth. Now, when I was in high school, this was like seventh or eighth grade, before high school, actually it was. I joined the International Preview Society. Remember that? We used to call it the International Pervert Society sometimes. It was a record club. And what they did was they licensed stuff from various labels, particularly the Universal group of labels, and issued them in trashy pressings at lower prices. And one of the sets I got from them was the Haitink London Phil Beethoven cycle, which was, on Philips. And it was a lot less expensive than getting it on Philips. I think it was like a special deal. They were like giving it away because I didn't know at the time that it was a really boring Beethoven cycle that no one much cared about. But in those days, labels promoted what they did. And, and it was in that beautiful Philips box. Remember their wonderful packaging with styrofoam? And it was elegant. The pressings were beautiful. Well, I got the cheapy version of it. And I was listening to Beethoven's Fifth, and to a passage that I knew particularly well in the first movement. And I didn't hear what I was supposed to hear. The woodwind part seemed to be missing. In fact, it sounded so different that I didn't even recognize it. I thought I was listening to a different piece or a different version of a different piece. It made me absolutely crazy. I grabbed my Klemperer and I stuck it back on. And sure enough, there was what I was expected to hear. And here was Haitink, who was quicker, yes, a little zippier, a little bit less emphatic. But those woodwind parts, if I listened really hard, there was maybe something cheeping or twittering in the background. And just to be clear, because it was driving me insane, I went and got a score. which I'd never done before. What was I going to do with a score of a symphony? Really? And I followed it. And so we get to this passage, which is in the development section, the first movement, measure 174. It's the part that goes da 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 dum bum bum. And underneath that, da 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 da. Let's do a different key. My voice is off. Da 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 da. And the strings make a descending thing. Do 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 do. Right. And while they do that, the woodwinds are going da da da. Da da dum, da da dum. They're doing like a little truncated version of the motto, 3 notes instead of 4, and they're going up and down by the trumpets, the horns, the clarinets, the oboes, the bassoons. Da da dum, da da dum, da da dum, da 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 dum, do 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 do, like that. Well, that's what you hear so clearly from Klemperer, and what you don't hear with Haitink. Now, those of you who are insider members at ClassicsToday.com can go to your insider section and look at the topic of Beethoven's Fifth. It'll be there on the homepage, and you can hear samples of those actual recordings, because I don't have to worry about copyright claims at Classics Today. So they're there, and you can go and listen to them, and I hope you do. And if you're not an insider member, I hope you join, because it's worth hearing these things. It's just so worth it. Anyway, but here is the actual moment in question, which is measure 174 for all you score readers. There it is. See right there? Now, this is the Igor Markevich edition of Beethoven's Fifth, believe it or not. He produced an edition of the Beethoven symphonies. I like this one because the type is large and you can see it. But there it is. And if you look at this, you can see what Klemperer is doing and what Haitink is not doing. The entire passage, because most pieces from the classical period participate in what's known as general dynamics, which is, not a technology or engineering firm. It means everybody's playing the same volume at the same time. And that's what happens here. The last volume that indication Beethoven gives is basically just più forte, which is almost fortissimo, and it's just for everybody. And he doesn't change it. It doesn't change until the diminuendo somewhere down here on this page. But there's a lot of stuff going on, and those instruments are not equally strong. They're not equally balanced. And so it is the job of the conductor to balance them, to do something. And in this case, you do want to hear that, because there are 2 different things going on in the passage in question. You have the lower strings, the violas, the cellos, and the basses going da 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 da, doing a descending scale. And on top of that, in the upper octaves, you have the woodwinds going do 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 do, like that. And you want to hear both of them. Well, Klemperer makes sure that you do. He does it by getting the violins out of the way, because they're going da 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 da, and they just hold that for quite a while the woodwinds are doing their thing. So he makes a diminuendo in the violins, and his balances, the recording balances, favor the woodwinds anyway, and so that passage comes out with pellucid clarity. It's absolutely marvelous. And I might add, it's not too slow. It's not too slow because, your perception of tempo depends on how much information is being conveyed by the performance. If you've got 2 things to listen to simultaneously, it's good to have time to hear them both. And so I never thought that this performance was slow, because you could hear so much, and other people did things more quickly, and they did things more quickly, and you heard less. You catch less of what Beethoven wrote. There's no getting around it, basically, or very little getting around it. And in fact, Klemperer has much more clarity than a lot of period instrument performances, which say, well, we use smaller orchestras, so everything's very clear. It's bullshit. It needs to be balanced by the guy on the podium. There's no way around it, because Beethoven's handling of dynamics was, by our standards of modern music, rather primitive. He just told everybody to play loud, but he would give different people different things to do simultaneously, so you needed to make decisions. How they did it in Beethoven's day, God only knows. Maybe it did sound like a period instrument performance in which they ignore half of what Beethoven wrote. Anyway, so let's just move right along. So Klemperer made this all extremely audible. And it fascinated me that there could be such a difference between interpretations. Haitink was not only a duller performance, and it is pretty dull, but you just didn't hear all of that stuff. And so I scratched my head and I said, what the hell is going on here? What is the job of the conductor? What is the job of the recording engineers? What are they doing to clarify Beethoven's intentions? What were Beethoven's intentions? All of these questions percolated in my brain. And as a result of that, I started collecting different performances and scores and following these differences in interpretations. And I still find that like totally fascinating and amazing and wonderful, and incredibly interesting. And it is what inspired me to become the critter that you see here now, a record critic, because I really think that there is a lot to talk about and discover still in interpretation. And I also think that in the world of music today, a lot of people who just don't think about those things, the people whose job it is to think about those things, the people who are supposed to think about those things and who are supposed to present them to us in an emotionally satisfying way. So that is what got me started. That 10 or 15 seconds of music. And it was Klemperer who really showed me the way. Now, you may like or not like the performance, and that's, of course, up to you. But there is no question that in terms of giving you more information for your time spent, bang for your buck, that Klemperer certainly justifies his interpretation, what he's doing, and does things that tell us more about what Beethoven's intentions were and what he actually wrote than a lot of people have before or since. There are other very great performances of Beethoven's Fifth. This is not my reference recording of Beethoven's Fifth. That, I believe, is Igor Markevich with the L'Amoureux Orchestra. He of the Beethoven edition, Beethoven symphonies. But that is the sort of thing that struck me. It just hit me like a thunderbolt. And the rest, as they say, is history. But I do urge you to go over to classicstoday.com and have a listen. Go to the Insider homepage where you'll find the header of this video and a little description of what you're about to hear, and listen to the two samples. I think you'll be startled. I really do. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me. Take care.